The elevator doors were already closing when Margaret Voss stepped out of them for the last time. A cardboard box balanced against her hip. A photo frame turned face down on top of a coffee mug that said, "World's Okayest Assistant." She had worked at Castellano Holdings for 3 years. She had never once been late. She had memorized the birthdays of every executive assistant on the 41st floor, the exact temperature the conference room needed to be kept at for the quarterly board meetings, and the specific brand of pen the chairman preferred, though she had never met him. She knew the building better than most of the men who ran it. None of that mattered 10 minutes ago when Harold Bick, her direct manager, called her into his glass office and told her the company was restructuring her position out of existence, effective immediately. Security would help her collect her things. She had not cried. She had learned a long time ago that crying in front of men like Harold Bick only fed something in them, some hunger to see a woman come apart. So she had nodded, thanked him for the opportunity, which cost her more than he would ever know, and walked out with her chin level and her spine straight. The box in her arms was heavier than it should have been for 3 years of work. A stapler, a cardigan, a framed photograph of her mother, gone 11 months now, smiling on a beach in a town Margaret had not been back to since the funeral. A small potted succulent that had somehow survived 3 years under fluorescent light. She was thinking about rent, about the 6 weeks of severance that would barely cover 2 months, about whether her car would make it another year without a transmission rebuild, when the private elevator at the end of the executive corridor chimed open, and a man stepped out who made the entire floor go quiet. Dominic Castellano did not look like what people expected when they heard the name. He was not showy. His suit was charcoal, cut close, no logo visible anywhere on him, the kind of tailoring that whispered rather than announced. A watch on his left wrist that had belonged to his father, though no one on this floor knew that. Dark hair, dark eyes, a stillness to him that made the air around him feel thinner. When he walked, people found reasons to be somewhere else. He was not supposed to be in the building today. He was supposed to be in a meeting 6 blocks away that had ended early, and he had decided, for reasons he could not fully explain even to himself, to walk through the office instead of heading straight back to his car. He saw her first. A woman with a box in her arms and red-rimmed eyes she was clearly refusing to let spill over, walking toward the elevator bank with the kind of dignity that made him stop moving. Who fired her? His voice was not loud. It did not need to be. The words landed in the hallway like a dropped glass, and every assistant, every junior associate, every person within 30 feet froze. Harold Bick came out of his office at the worst possible moment, adjusting his tie, already halfway into an explanation about restructuring and headcount optimization before he registered who was standing there. "Mr. Castellano, I did not realize you were on the floor today. I can explain. The position was made redundant as part of Q3 realignment. I did not ask you to explain the position." Dominic had not raised his voice, and somehow that was worse. "I asked who fired her." Margaret stood frozen by the elevator, box still in her arms, feeling every eye on the floor swing toward her, like she had become something dangerous simply by existing in this moment. She did not know who this man was. She knew the name Castellano was on the building, on the letterhead, on the health insurance cards, but she had never once seen the man attached to it. He had always felt more like weather than a person, something that happened to the building rather than someone who walked through it. "I did, sir." Harold's voice had lost its confidence entirely. Her role was her name. Harold blinked. "I'm sorry?" "Her name. You fired her. You should know her name." There was a silence that stretched long enough for Margaret to hear the hum of the fluorescent lights overhead, something she had never noticed in 3 years of working under them. "Margaret," she said, before Harold could stumble through an answer that would embarrass him further. Margaret Voss. Dominic turned his head toward her for the first time, and she felt the full weight of his attention land on her like a hand pressed flat against her sternum. His eyes moved over her once, not the way men usually looked at her, not cataloging her body, but reading her the way she imagined he read a contract, looking for the clause that mattered. Margaret Voss, he repeated, and something about the way he said it made her stomach tighten in a way she did not have a name for yet. Put the box down, Miss Voss. I'm sorry? You do not need it. You are not leaving. Harold made a small, strangled sound. Mr. Castellano, with respect, the restructuring was approved by the department head. There are protocols. There were protocols, Dominic said. Past tense. Come with me, Harold. It was not a request. Harold followed him toward the glass office at the end of the hall, the way a man follows a sentence he already knows the shape of. The door closed. The blinds, which had never once been closed in the 18 months Harold occupied that office, came down with a soft, mechanical whir. Margaret stood in the hallway holding her box, surrounded by co-workers who were now very determined to look busy and had absolutely no idea what had just happened to her life. Whatever was said behind that glass door took 4 minutes. When Harold Bick came back out, his face had the particular gray pallor of a man who had just watched his own career end in real time. He did not look at Margaret. He did not look at anyone. He walked to his office, closed the door, and 20 minutes later a security escort walked him out of the building with his own box of belongings, considerably smaller than hers. Margaret was still standing by the elevator, unsure whether to leave, stay, or simply set the box down and pretend the last 10 minutes had not happened, when Dominic Castellano crossed the floor toward her again. Miss Voss, my office. Now, please. The please surprised her more than the command had. She followed him because the alternative, standing in a hallway holding a cardboard box like a shipwreck survivor clutching driftwood, felt worse than whatever was waiting for her in that glass room. His office smelled like cedar and something underneath it, leather maybe, or the particular scent of expensive paper and older money. He gestured to a chair. She sat, box still in her lap, because setting it down felt like an admission that she believed any of this was real. Do you know who I am? He asked. You own the company. I run the company. Ownership is a more complicated question. He sat across from her, close enough that she could see the fine grain of the wool in his suit, the signet ring on his right hand that looked old, older than him, the kind of thing passed down rather than purchased. You have worked here 3 years. Executive floor, Department of Investor Relations support. You reorganized the entire filing system in your first 6 months without being asked. You built the templates that half this floor still uses for board packets, though I doubt any of them credit you. Margaret's mouth had gone dry. How do you know that? I read reports. I do not always act on them. A muscle moved faintly at his jaw, something that might have been regret, though she could not be sure. That was a mistake. I am correcting it. I don't understand what's happening right now. He studied her for a long moment before he spoke again, and when he did, his voice had dropped into something quieter, more deliberate. Harold Bick did not fire you because your position was redundant. He fired you because 2 weeks ago you flagged a discrepancy in a vendor payment schedule that he had personally approved. You sent that flag to compliance instead of burying it, the way he expected a woman in your position to do. He has spent the last 2 weeks finding a reason to remove you before compliance finished their review. Margaret felt something cold move through her chest. I didn't know that. I know you didn't. That is precisely why it worked as long as it did. He leaned back slightly. The payment schedule you flagged was not a clerical error, Miss Voss. It was moving money for people who should not have access to this company's accounts. You found it by accident, doing your job correctly, and it nearly cost you that job entirely. I would like to know what else you have noticed in 3 years that no one thought to ask you about. She stared at him. Are you telling me I got fired because I did my job too well? I am telling you that you got fired because a mediocre man felt threatened by a competent woman, and I let the culture of this company get bad enough that he believed he could get away with it. Both of those things are my fault. He said it simply, without performance, the way a man states a fact he has already made peace with. I am also telling you that the vendor account you flagged belongs, indirectly, to people I have spent 11 years trying to remove from every corner of this business. You may have just done more damage to them by accident than my legal team has managed on purpose in 3 years. Margaret set the box down on the floor beside her chair, finally, because her arms had started to ache and because something in her had decided, without her full permission, that she was staying. What does that mean for me? It means I would like you to keep your job, a better one, and it means, for the immediate future, you should not go home alone tonight. That's not, she started, and then stopped, because the look on his face was not a man flirting with her. It was a man calculating a threat radius, and she was standing inside it. I'm not trying to frighten you, Miss Voss. You're doing an excellent job of it anyway. Something flickered at the corner of his mouth, not quite a smile, gone before it fully formed. Then we understand each other. He walked her to the elevator himself, which drew every eye on the floor a second time, and he did not speak again until the doors were closing between them. I will have someone reach out about your new position by tomorrow morning, he said. In the meantime, if anyone from outside this building contacts you about that vendor account, do not answer. Call me instead. I don't have your number. He reached into his jacket and handed her a card, plain white, no logo, only a name and a single line of numbers. The paper was heavy in her hand, expensive in a way she associated with wedding invitations rather than business cards. Now you do. The elevator closed. Margaret stood inside it alone, holding a business card from a man she had worked beneath for 3 years and never once seen, and felt, for the first time since Harold Bick's voice had informed her the company was restructuring her out of existence, something that was not quite fear and not quite relief, but sat somewhere dangerously close to both. She did not go home alone that night, though not for the reason she expected. A black car was waiting outside her apartment building when her rideshare pulled up, and the man leaning against it, arms crossed, built like a doorway that had learned to walk, introduced himself only as Tomas. Mr. Castellano's orders. I'll be outside tonight. I didn't ask for a bodyguard. No, ma'am, he did. She wanted to argue. She was too tired to argue. She went inside, locked her door, and lay awake most of the night with the plain white card sitting on her nightstand, like something that might start ringing on its own. It rang 2 days later, though not the card. Her new office phone, on the 38th floor this time, a corner office she had not applied for, and did not fully believe was hers, with a title that made her laugh out loud when she first read it on the nameplate. Director of Financial Integrity, Investor Relations Division. A 50% salary increase attached to it, delivered without ceremony, as if giving a 25-year-old woman a director title and a corner office was simply the correction of an accounting error rather than the complete restructuring of her professional life. The call was Dominic. Miss Voss, I need you to come to my office, now, if you can. She could. She always could, apparently, when it came to him, though she was trying very hard not to examine that fact too closely. His office looked different in the afternoon light, warmer, though the man behind the desk did not. He gestured for her to sit, and this time he did not sit across from her behind the desk. He came around it and sat in the chair beside hers, close enough that she caught the cedar and leather again, closer this time, and something underneath it that might have been gunpowder, faint, almost imagined. "The vendor account you flagged belongs to a man named Silvio Greco," he said without preamble. "He runs a rival operation out of Atlantic City. For the past year he has been laundering money through 3 of my subsidiary accounts, using a signature that was forged well enough to fool everyone except you." "I didn't do anything special. The numbers didn't reconcile. That's the whole job." "That is the whole job for you. For everyone else on that floor, the whole job was not asking questions." He watched her with an intensity that made her want to look away and made her unable to. "Greco knows his account was flagged. He does not know who flagged it. Yet. Harold Bick's dismissal and the very public manner in which I removed him has made your promotion the subject of some interest on that floor. It will not take long for that interest to reach the wrong ears." "You're telling me I'm in danger because you promoted me too visibly?" "I am telling you I made a decision emotionally instead of tactically, and I do not do that often." He said it like a confession, though his face gave away nothing beyond the words themselves. "I saw a competent woman being punished for doing her job with more integrity than the men around her, and I reacted. I do not regret the decision. I regret the exposure it created." Margaret sat with that for a long moment. "So what happens now?" "Now you continue working exactly as you have been, because Greco needs to believe nothing has changed, and Tomas remains outside your building until this resolves. And you tell me, honestly, whether you understand what kind of company you actually work for." She had suspected, of course. Everyone on the executive floor suspected, in the vague, uneasy way that people suspect things they have decided not to look at directly. Cash that moved strangely. Men who visited the building and never signed in at the front desk. The particular silence that fell over certain conversations when she walked into a room holding files. "I think I've known for a while," she said. "I just never had proof, and I never wanted it, because proof would have meant deciding what to do about it." "And now that you have it?" "Now I suppose I have to decide." He watched her for a long moment, something unreadable moving behind his eyes. "Most people faced with that decision choose to disappear. A different job, a different city, distance between themselves and men like me." "Is that what you want me to do?" "No." The word came out faster and more certain than he seemed to expect from himself, and something in his jaw tightened, as if he had said more than he intended. "I want you to be careful. Those are different things." That night, Tomas walked her to her door as usual, and this time, instead of getting back in the car immediately, he lingered on the sidewalk a moment. "He doesn't do this," Tomas said, apropos of nothing, watching her fumble with her keys. "Do what?" "Assign personal protection. Show up on the executive floor unannounced. Sit next to someone instead of behind a desk." He shrugged, the movement of a man who had clearly decided he had already said too much and was going to say it anyway. "Just an observation, Miss Voss." She did not sleep well that night either, though this time it had less to do with fear. The next 2 weeks passed in a strange, suspended rhythm. Work by day, careful and ordinary, files and spreadsheets and the low hum of an office that had no idea what was moving beneath it. Tomas outside her building by night, and, twice, unannounced, Dominic himself, standing across the street in the dark with his hands in his coat pockets, watching her window until the light went out, gone by morning as if he had never been there at all, though she always somehow knew. The break came on a Thursday. Margaret was reviewing the Greco account files late, alone on the 38th floor, when her office phone rang from an internal extension she did not recognize. "Miss Voss, this is building security. There's a delivery for you downstairs. Needs a signature." She had not ordered anything. She should have known immediately, but the voice was calm and bored in the exact way real security voices sounded, and she was tired, and she went. The lobby was empty when she reached it. No delivery, no security guard at the desk, which struck her as wrong half a second too late. A man she did not recognize stepped out from the alcove near the elevators, mid-40s, heavyset, wearing a coat too warm for the season, and an expression that made her stomach drop before he said a single word. "Miss Voss, Mr. Greco would like a word." She did not scream. She had learned, somewhere in the last 3 years, that screaming rarely helped and often escalated, and in the half-second she had to decide, her mind moved with a clarity that surprised even her. She was standing near the security desk. The desk had a panic button beneath the counter, installed after a workplace violence training session 18 months ago that she remembered specifically because she had been the one who filed the requisition for the equipment. She stepped backward toward the desk, as if retreating in fear, which was not entirely a performance, and let her hand find the edge of the counter, and pressed the button before the man had closed half the distance between them. "I don't know who Mr. Greco is," she said, keeping her voice steadier than she felt, buying seconds, only seconds. "I think you have the wrong floor." "I don't think I do." He kept walking, unhurried, the walk of a man who had done this before and expected no resistance. "You're going to come with me quietly, and nobody in this building gets hurt tonight." The alarm she had triggered was silent, designed that way on purpose. No blaring siren to spook an intruder into violence, only a direct signal to the building's private security contractor, and, she would learn later, directly to Tomas's phone, and Dominic's after it. She did not know that yet. What she knew was that she had perhaps 90 seconds before this man reached her, and she used them. She grabbed the heavy glass vase from the reception desk, the one that had sat there untouched for 3 years holding fake orchids nobody watered, and threw it, not at his head, which she would likely have missed, but at his knees, hard enough to make him stumble and swear and lose 2 full seconds of his advance. Those 2 seconds were enough. The lobby door burst open, and Tomas came through it first, followed a half-beat later by Dominic himself, coat open, movement precise in a way that made the air in the room feel different, colder, charged. What happened next took less than a minute, and Margaret would remember all of it in fragments, rather than sequence, for a long time afterward. Dominic did not shout. He did not hesitate. He crossed the lobby with the economy of a man who had done violence before and found no pleasure in performing it, only in finishing it quickly. The heavy-set man went down hard against the marble floor, and whatever happened between the two of them lasted only seconds, brutal and precise, and over before Margaret had fully processed that it had begun. Tomas was at her side almost immediately, checking her over with quick, efficient hands, asking if she was hurt, and she shook her head, adrenaline making her hands shake even as her voice stayed steady. I'm fine. I threw a vase at him." Something that might have been a laugh, dark and short, came from Tomas. "Remind me never to make you angry, Miss Voss." Dominic straightened from where the intruder now lay motionless on the marble, and turned toward her, and for the first time since she had met him, something in his composure had cracked entirely open. His eyes moved over her, checking for injury the way Tomas had, but with none of the professional distance, his hands actually reaching for her shoulders before he seemed to catch himself and stop, fingers hovering an inch from her arms as if he did not trust himself to touch her and stop there. Margaret. Her first name, not her surname, and it landed differently than anything he had said to her before, low and rough, stripped of the careful control he wore like a second suit. Are you hurt? No. Her voice cracked slightly on the word, the adrenaline finally catching up to her. I'm not hurt. I should not have let this happen. His jaw was tight, his voice tighter. I told myself the exposure was manageable. I was wrong, and it nearly cost you. I'm the one who threw a vase at a grown man's knees, Dominic. I think I handled it. Using his first name, unplanned, slipped out of her in the chaos of the moment, and she watched it land on him visibly, watched something in his shoulders shift. You should not have had to handle anything, he said. This is my mess. It should never have touched you. It touched me the moment I flagged that account. That was my choice, not yours. She was still shaking, but her voice had steadied into something firmer. I'm not asking you to protect me from consequences I chose to create. He studied her for a long moment, something working behind his eyes that looked almost like disbelief, the particular disbelief of a man encountering something he had assumed did not exist anymore. Most people in your position would be furious with me right now. I am furious with you, she said it plainly. I'm also standing here instead of leaving, which I think tells you something you should probably think about. Something crossed his face then, brief and unguarded, gone before she could name it fully, though it looked dangerously close to hope. The man on the floor was Greco's enforcer, not Greco himself, and what he revealed in the hours that followed, under circumstances Margaret was not present for and did not ask too many questions about, gave Dominic exactly what he needed. Not just proof of the laundered accounts, but a name, a location, a meeting scheduled for the following week between Greco and two commission representatives who had grown tired of his reckless expansion and were prepared to remove him permanently from consideration, provided someone handed them undeniable proof of his instability. Margaret provided that proof, not because Dominic asked her to, but because she sat down at her own desk 2 nights later, against Tomas's mild objection and Dominic's outright one, and built a financial trail so clean and so damning that even a room full of skeptical old men with their own interests to protect would not be able to argue with it. She built it the way she built everything, methodically, precisely, refusing every offer of help because this, finally, was something she could control completely. You didn't have to do this, Dominic told her, standing in the doorway of her office at nearly midnight, watching her work with an expression she had started to recognize as something closer to reverence than surprise. No, she agreed, not looking up from her screen. I wanted to. Why? She did look up then and held his gaze steadily. Because I'm tired of watching men decide what I'm capable of without asking me. You did it too, you know, sending Tomas without asking if I wanted him, deciding I needed protecting instead of asking what I actually needed. What do you need? To finish this, on my own terms. She turned back to her screen. You can stay if you want, but you're not doing this for me. He stayed. He did not offer to help again. He sat in the chair across from her desk for 3 hours in near silence, and something about the quality of that silence, the way he simply existed in the room with her without needing to fill it or fix it, settled something in her chest that she had not realized was still unsettled. It was nearly 3 in the morning when she finished, and the office had gone completely silent around them, the kind of silence that exists only in tall buildings after midnight, thick and total. She sat back from her screen and looked at him, and he was already looking at her, and the space between them, which had been carefully, deliberately maintained for weeks, suddenly felt impossibly small. You should go home, he said, and his voice had gone rough again, the way it had in the lobby. "You keep telling me what I should do." She stood, came around the desk, stopped close enough that she could see the exact shade of his eyes, dark brown with something almost gold near the center that she had never been close enough to notice before. "I'm tired of that too." Margaret. Her name again, and it carried a warning this time, though his hands had already found her waist, careful, restrained, a man holding himself back by force of will alone. "If you stay right now, I am not going to be careful about this anymore." "I don't want you to be careful." Whatever control he had been exercising for weeks broke entirely then, and he kissed her the way he did everything, deliberately, completely, nothing held back once the decision had been made. She kissed him back with the same certainty, 3 weeks of danger and proximity and careful distance, collapsing into a single moment neither of them tried to undo. He did not ask her to stop. She did not ask him to slow down. When he finally pulled back, just far enough to look at her, his forehead resting against hers, his breathing unsteady in a way she had never once seen from him, he said the only thing he had left to say. "I told myself I would not do this while Greco was still a threat to you." "Greco is going to be dealt with in 6 days, she said. "I'm not waiting 6 days. Something that was almost a laugh moved through him, dark and low. "No, I don't suppose you are." The commission meeting happened exactly as planned 6 days later, in a private room above a restaurant in a part of the city Margaret had never had reason to visit, and though she was not permitted inside for the actual proceedings, she sat in a car outside with Tomas, the financial documentation she had built resting in a sealed folder on the seat between them, and waited. Dominic came out 90 minutes later, looking older than he had that morning. Something heavy settled into his shoulders that had not been there before. He got into the car without speaking, and it was not until they were 3 blocks away that he finally exhaled and reached for her hand. "It's finished," he said. "Greco will not be a problem again." "What did that cost you?" she asked, because she had learned enough about his world by now to know that nothing in it came free. He was quiet for a long moment. "An old friendship. Greco and I came up together, decades ago, before either of us understood what we would become. There was a version of tonight where I could have argued for something less permanent." His jaw tightened. "I did not make that argument. He would have come for you again. I was not willing to take that risk twice." "I'm sorry," she said, and meant it, understanding for the first time the full weight of what he carried, the particular loneliness of a man who measured every relationship against the possibility of betrayal and had just watched an old one confirm his worst instincts about the world. "Don't be." He turned her hand over in his, tracing the lines of her palm with a gentleness that felt entirely at odds with the man who had crossed that lobby 3 weeks ago like something out of a nightmare. "I have spent 11 years building walls around every part of my life that could be used against me. You walked through every one of them without trying, because you refused to be afraid of me the way everyone else is." "I was afraid of you," she said honestly. "I still am, a little." "Good." His mouth curved, the first real smile she had seen from him, small and unguarded and entirely genuine. "Fear without respect is foolish. Respect without fear is naive. You have managed both, which I am told is rare." "Is that your version of a declaration?" "I don't make declarations, Margaret. I make decisions." He lifted her hand and pressed his mouth to her knuckles, an old-world gesture that should have felt performative, and instead felt like the truest thing he had ever done in front of her. "I have decided you are not going anywhere. I would like to know if you have decided the same thing." She thought about the box of belongings still sitting, 3 weeks later, unpacked in the corner of her apartment. She thought about the succulent that had survived 3 years under fluorescent light and somehow, against every reasonable expectation, was still alive. She thought about a version of her life 6 weeks ago when she had walked out of a building with her chin level and her spine straight, and no idea that the worst day of her professional life was about to become the hinge on which everything else turned. "I already decided," she said, "the night I threw a vase at a grown man's knees instead of running." He laughed then, real and warm, a sound she suspected very few people in his life had ever been given the privilege of hearing, and pulled her against him in the back of a car moving slowly through a city that belonged, in ways both terrible and undeniable, to him. She did not become someone else's story after that. She kept her corner office and her director title, and the particular satisfaction of watching Harold Bick's old office get reassigned to someone considerably less arrogant. She kept her methodical mind and her unwillingness to be dazzled by money. She still, out of habit, calculated the cost of every time she walked into a room that had clearly cost more than her old apartment building. What she gained was a man who said her name like it meant something, who had learned, slowly and against every instinct he had spent a lifetime building, that the woman standing beside him did not need protecting so much as she needed to be trusted, and who understood now that the two things had never actually been the same. The box from that first day still sat in the corner of her apartment for a long time after, unpacked, because some part of her had decided, quietly and without fanfare, that she was never going to need to pack it again.